The Arizona sun beat down with relentless intensity, even in late September of 1997. It was a dry, searing heat that baked the asphalt roads of Phoenix and shimmered off the stucco walls of the suburban homes, a constant, oppressive presence that locals learned to live with. For Sarah Jenkins, 17 years old and radiating the vibrant energy of youth, it was simply home. She loved the vast, open skies that stretched limitlessly overhead, the distant purple mountains shimmering on the horizon, and the unique, earthy scent the desert air carried after a rare summer monsoon. Sarah was a senior at North Canyon High School, a vibrant spark in its hallways, a star cheerleader whose dazzling smile could light up an entire stadium, and a diligent student with clear, ambitious dreams of a scholarship to Arizona State University for nursing. She was, in every sense, a golden girl, poised on the precipice of a promising future, unaware of the darkness lurking just beneath the surface of her ordinary world. Her days were a meticulously organized whirlwind of activity. Mornings began before the sun fully cleared the eastern horizon, with the demanding regimen of early cheer practice, the sharp crack of her sneakers on the highly polished gym floor echoing in the pre-dawn quiet, a rhythmic testament to her discipline. After school, it was usually a 4-hour shift at the Cactus Blossom Diner, a local institution on Bell Road known more for its greasy, comforting burgers and lukewarm, bottomless coffee than for gourmet dining. Yet it was a place with a steady stream of regulars who watched Sarah grow up, treating her with a blend of paternal affection and respectful admiration. She'd deftly balance trays piled high with plates of fries and milkshakes, flash her easy, genuine smile at weary truck drivers and chatty retirees, and banter playfully with Earl, the grizzled, perpetually grumpy cook, all while expertly juggling calculus problems and English essay topics in her head. Evenings were often spent with her inseparable best friend, Maria Rodriguez, either poring over textbooks in Maria's slightly messy room, fueled by convenience store sodas, or planning weekend escapades that typically involved cruising down Thunderbird Road with the windows down, the oppressive heat temporarily forgotten as they blasted Alanis Morissette or Oasis from Sarah's worn CD player. Sarah lived in a comfortable 3-bedroom ranch-style house in the quiet, tree-lined Moon Valley area, a quintessential Phoenix suburb. Her parents, Robert and Alina Jenkins, had built a life there, a sanctuary filled with the usual cacophony of a busy family. Robert was a gruff but undeniably loving man, his hands perpetually stained with grime and calluses from his demanding work in commercial construction. Alina was a kindergarten teacher, her patience seemingly boundless, her innate worry for her children, a quiet, persistent hum beneath her perpetually cheerful exterior. Their home was a lively hub, the clatter of dinner preparations emanating from the kitchen, Michael's incessant video game noises from the den, and Sarah's frequent, often hour-long, phone calls on the beige wall-mounted landline in the kitchen, gossiping with Maria about crushes, college applications, and the petty dramas of high school life. Life was good, predictable, and brimming with the promise of an exciting future. Sarah had recently received an early acceptance to a highly competitive nursing program, a dream she'd chased with unwavering determination since she was a little girl. Her parents, bursting with pride, had already started envisioning her graduation and her first job, their hearts swelling with a hopeful future. There were, of course, the typical, fleeting teenage dramas. A brief, passionate argument with her boyfriend, Mark, over a perceived slight at a football practice. A minor disagreement with her mother about curfew boundaries, usually resolved with a hug and a promise. Nothing out of the ordinary, just the natural ebb and flow of adolescence. Sarah was, by all accounts, a good kid, perhaps a little too trusting, a trait her mother occasionally worried about, a tendency to see the inherent good in everyone, sometimes to a fault. Yet she'd always been careful. Robert had taught her basic car maintenance and drilled into her the importance of always checking her surroundings, especially at night. Alina had meticulously drilled into her the non-negotiable rule of always telling someone where she was going and when she'd be back. Sarah carried a clunky Nokia 2110, an early model cell phone, mostly for emergencies, its battery life notoriously short, but she relied far more on pagers and public payphones for her daily communications, a typical habit for teenagers of the era. The last Friday of September 1997 dawned like any other, the air already thick with a dry, almost palpable heat by 8 a.m. It was the night of the annual North Canyon High School homecoming football game, a hotly anticipated clash against the rival Deer Valley Skyhawks. Sarah, as head cheerleader, was practically vibrating with excitement. Her meticulously pressed red and white uniform was laid out, her pom-poms fluffed to perfection. After the game, she and Maria had ironed out plans to hit up a raucous party at Kevin's house, a senior whose parents were conveniently out of town for the weekend. Sarah had promised her mom she'd be home by midnight, a promise she fully intended to keep, always mindful of Aliner's anxieties. She left the Cactus Blossom Diner around 5:30 p.m., her shift ending earlier than usual to accommodate the game. The sun was still high, a blazing orb in the cloudless sky, casting long, distorted shadows across the asphalt. She waved goodbye to Earl, the grizzled cook, and slid into her trusty 1995 red Honda Civic, a well-loved hand-me-down from her older cousin, its paint faded in places from years of relentless desert sun. The air conditioner, a common complaint in Phoenix summers, barely worked, emitting only a weak, asthmatic wheeze, but Sarah didn't mind. She popped in a Limp Bizkit CD $3 bill. Y'all had just come out and headed towards the school, the bass thumping a rhythm to her excitement. The game was a blur of high-energy cheers, synchronized chants, and gravity-defying routines. North Canyon won decisively, a triumphant 28-7 victory. The stadium erupted into a cacophony of cheers and celebratory screams, and Sarah, exhilarated, gathered her squad for a final, victorious huddle. Maria met her just outside the bustling locker rooms, her face flushed with excitement for the impending party. "You ready, girl?" Maria asked, her voice almost lost in the departing crowd, nudging Sarah playfully with her elbow. Sarah, still buzzing, grinned widely. "Almost. Just gotta change out of this uniform and grab my bag from my car. You go on ahead, I'll be right behind you. Text me the address again, just in case." Maria nodded, pulling out her own pager to send the quick numeric code, then melted into the stream of students heading towards the parking lot. Sarah's car was parked near the very back lot, a bit of a walk from the main entrance, but she preferred the isolated shade of the old mesquite trees that lined the perimeter. That was the last time Maria Rodriguez, or anyone else beyond a fleeting glimpse by a couple of departing stragglers who couldn't remember details, ever saw Sarah Jenkins. Midnight came and went. Robert and Alina were initially just mildly annoyed. Sarah was usually so unfailingly punctual, almost obsessively so. By 1 a.m., annoyance had twisted into a dull, throbbing concern. Robert called Maria's pager, then her home phone, the landline ringing hollowly in the quiet house. Maria answered, sleepy and genuinely confused. Sarah hadn't shown up at Kevin's party at all. She had simply assumed Sarah had just gone straight home. The concern quickly escalated to a sharp, sickening alarm. Alina tried Sarah's cumbersome cell phone again. It went straight to voicemail, just as it had earlier when Alina had called to remind her about the curfew. This wasn't like Sarah. She always answered, or at least called back within minutes. A creeping dread began to settle over the Jenkins household, a cold wave in the oppressive Phoenix heat. By 2:30 a.m., Robert was out in his battered Ford F-150 pickup truck, cruising the familiar route Sarah usually took home, checking the Cactus Blossom's deserted parking lot, the now empty school lot. He found nothing, no faded red Honda Civic, no sign of Sarah. Alina was on the phone, her voice now a desperate quaver, calling every friend, every teammate, every acquaintance listed in Sarah's worn address book. The local Phoenix Police Department was finally notified at 3:15 a.m. Officer Miller, a fresh-faced patrolman barely out of the academy, took the initial report, his voice measured and professional but his eyes betraying a hint of palpable unease. A 17-year-old girl seemingly vanished without a trace into the vast, hot Arizona night. Detective Mark Riley, a 20-year veteran of the Phoenix PD's Major Crimes Unit, caught the case the following morning. Riley was a man carved from the same hard, unyielding landscape as Phoenix itself, weathered, tenacious, and not easily surprised by the darker corners of human nature. He had seen too much, too often, the grim realities of the city leaving indelible marks on his soul. He arrived at the Jenkins' modest home, a grim expression etched on his face, the rising sun doing little to dispel the chilling, heavy atmosphere that now permeated every room. The house, usually vibrant and bustling, was now a tomb of whispered anxieties and unspoken fears. Alina was a pale, trembling shadow of her former self, clutching a damp tissue, while Robert, his jaw tight and muscles tense, recited the agonizing details to Riley for what felt like the 10th time, his voice hoarse with despair. The initial investigation was a frantic, desperate scramble. Patrol cars fanned out across the Moon Valley and North Phoenix areas, their sirens a mournful chorus in the early morning hours. Flyers with Sarah's smiling face, a vibrant, innocent portrait taken from her cheerleading photo, were hastily printed and plastered on every lamppost, every grocery store window, every community bulletin board. The local news channels picked up the story with a voracious hunger, Sarah's disappearance becoming the lead segment for days, her face flashing across television screens in countless homes. Neighbors, shocked and fearful, volunteered for search parties, bravely combing through the rugged desert washes, winding hiking trails, and abandoned lots that dotted the city's periphery. The heat was unforgiving, often topping 100 degrees Fahrenheit, making the ground search a grueling, often demoralizing ordeal under the relentless sun. Riley interviewed Maria extensively, her young face streaked with tears and confusion. She recounted the events of the game, Sarah's plans for the party, their brief, final conversation. She mentioned Sarah had seemed a little distracted lately, a bit withdrawn at times, perhaps preoccupied by something she hadn't shared, but Maria couldn't pinpoint anything concrete, no specific person or secret. Mark, Sarah's distraught boyfriend, was questioned rigorously. He insisted he had been home after the game, providing an alibi corroborated by his equally distressed parents. He was quickly cleared, his grief as raw and genuine as the Jenkins. The cooks and waitstaff at the Cactus Blossom confirmed Sarah's departure time. Nothing, absolutely nothing, seemed out of place. No forced entry, no signs of a struggle, no credible witnesses. Sarah's car, a crucial piece of evidence that could have provided a directional clue, was nowhere to be found. It was as if she and her trusty red Honda Civic had simply dissolved into the vast, indifferent desert air. Riley brought in K-9 units, but the desert floor, baked hard by decades of sun and often covered in loose, shifting gravel, offered little scent for the dogs to track. The sheer vastness of the Sonoran Desert, stretching for hundreds of miles beyond the city's immediate edges, became an intimidating, silent accomplice to the vanishing, an inscrutable guardian of secrets. Every arroyo, every hidden canyon, every abandoned mine shaft felt like a potential, terrifying resting place. The police followed every faint lead, every anonymous phone call, every rumor that buzzed through the frightened community. They chased down reports of a suspicious older model Ford pickup truck seen near the school, a man with a beard loitering in the parking lot. Each lead, each flicker of hope, meticulously investigated, only led to dead ends, further deepening the despair of the Jenkins family and the frustration of the investigators. Weeks bled into months. The initial flurry of intense investigative activity waned, replaced by a grim, methodical grind. Tips continued to flood in, mostly unsubstantiated sightings. A girl resembling Sarah in Flagstaff, a car matching Sarah's description on a -10 headed towards California, a possible runaway girl in Tucson. Each lead was diligently pursued by Riley and his increasingly weary team, sometimes requiring travel across state lines, but each time it led only to disappointment, further deepening the profound, almost unbearable despair of the Jenkins family. Robert and Alina clung to every faint hope, their lives consumed by the agonizing, fruitless search. Alina, a woman who once radiated warmth and optimism, stopped teaching, utterly unable to face the bright, innocent faces of children when her own daughter was lost in a terrifying, unknown limbo. Robert, once a strong, stoic figure, now carried a perpetual sorrow in his eyes, his shoulders slumped under an invisible weight. Michael, Sarah's younger brother, became withdrawn, his playful energy replaced by a quiet, pervasive sadness that shrouded his adolescence. The once vibrant Jenkins home felt empty, its silence punctuated only by the occasional, jarring ring of the phone, each call a fresh jolt of hope quickly dashed, leaving behind only deeper disappointment. The police, despite their exhaustive efforts and Riley's personal commitment, felt the walls of the case closing in. Without a body, without the crucial car, without a single credible witness or a definitive crime scene, the case slowly but inexorably began to cool. The local and national media moved on to other, more immediate stories. The ubiquitous yellow ribbons that had adorned trees and lampposts faded and shredded in the relentless sun, and the posters of Sarah's vibrant face became worn, tattered, and ultimately peeled away. Detective Riley, however, refused to close the file. He kept Sarah's thick, increasingly dog-eared missing person folder on his desk, a constant, gnawing reminder of the unsolved mystery. He'd revisit it late at night, long after his colleagues had gone home, poring over the same reports, the same cryptic interviews, searching for a single, overlooked detail, a nuanced turn of phrase that could break the case open. He often found himself driving past North Canyon High or past the Cactus Blossom, imagining Sarah there, hoping for a flicker of insight, a spark of inspiration. He saw the profound, debilitating toll it took on the Jenkins, their faces etched with grief, unanswered questions, and a decade of sleepless nights. It was a failure that gnawed at him, a ghost he couldn't shake. 8 years crawled by, each passing year heavier than the last for the Jenkins family, each one adding another layer of suffocating grief and uncertainty. 1997 became 1998, then the new millennium, then 2005. Sarah would have been 25, a registered nurse perhaps, married with kids, living the life she had so eagerly planned. These imagined milestones passed by uncelebrated, replaced by an aching, gaping void. Robert and Alina lived in a perpetual state of agonizing limbo, unable to fully mourn, yet utterly unable to move on. They eventually sold the house in Moon Valley, the memories too painful, the silence too deafening, and moved to a smaller, anonymous place in Scottsdale, hoping a change of scenery might offer some semblance of peace. It didn't. The wound remained open, festering, a constant ache in their hearts. Then, in the late spring of 2005, a meteorological anomaly gripped Arizona. Not the usual short, intense monsoon downpour, but days of relentless, torrential rain, turning dry washes into raging, destructive rivers and reshaping parts of the usually immutable Sonoran desert landscape with terrifying force. Flash flood warnings blared across radio stations, echoing from every car stereo and kitchen radio. Creeks overflowed their banks, entire sections of roads were washed away or closed. It was during the immediate aftermath, a week later, as the desert began to slowly dry and recede, its scarred surface revealing new contours and hidden dangers, that a group of recreational off-roaders on an obscure, rarely used trail near the rugged Estrella Mountains made a horrifying discovery. Deep within a newly carved arroyo, a fresh gash in the ancient desert floor, partially buried under a fresh mound of sand and flood debris, sat the rusted, decaying hulk of a car. Its once vibrant red paint was stripped and pitted in places, its tires rotted to crumbling rubber, its windows opaque with years of dust and grime, but the distinctive silhouette of a 1995 Honda Civic was still discernible beneath the layers of neglect and time. The off-roaders, initially thinking it was just some long-abandoned junker, called the sheriff's office as required by law. When Detective Riley got the call from Estrella County Sheriff's Department, a cold shiver of premonition ran down his spine, a mix of profound dread and a faint, flickering, almost unbearable hope. It was a location that had been deemed too remote, too inaccessible for the initial, hurried searches in 1997, an area not easily traversed by standard police vehicles or even K-9 units back then. He knew with an unsettling certainty what car it would be. The desert had finally given up its secret. The recovery operation was arduous and painstaking, involving heavy equipment and a team of specialists. The Civic was carefully, delicately extricated from the thick mud and heavy sand, its corroded metal groaning under the strain, threatening to disintegrate. What they found inside, once the vehicle was secured and meticulously processed as a crime scene, confirmed Riley's darkest, most persistent fears, and yet, paradoxically, offered a macabre, brutal form of closure. Sarah Jenkins was there, or what remained of her. Her skeletal remains, barely discernible beneath faded clothing, were eerily entangled in the driver's seat. The desert, in its brutal, unfeeling indifference, had preserved her final resting place for nearly a decade, a chilling, silent monument to a lost life. But then this surfaced, clutched loosely in the skeletal remains of her right hand, protected somewhat by the car's interior from the worst of the elements and the ravages of time, was a small, plastic, water-damaged Kodak fun-saver disposable camera. It was an item ubiquitous in 1997, a cheap, simple way to capture ephemeral memories, a common accessory for teenagers. The police forensic team processed the car and its contents with meticulous care, treating every speck of dust as potential evidence, though the precise cause of death couldn't immediately be determined due to the extreme state of decomposition. The camera, however, was a profound, almost miraculous find. Despite its corroded condition and the water damage, the forensics team believed there was a chance, however slim, that some of its 27 exposures might be salvageable, might hold the key to Sarah's last moments. The anticipation for the Jenkins family and for Detective Riley was agonizing. The Jenkins family was notified, their initial shock at the discovery of Sarah's remains giving way to a new, overwhelming wave of unbearable grief, deeper and more visceral than the limbo they had endured for so long. But alongside it, a sliver of desperate, fragile hope for answers, for understanding. Days stretched into a torturous week as specialists from the crime lab worked with painstaking, almost surgical care to extract and develop the fragile film, a process fraught with technical challenges and the constant, terrifying fear of irrevocably destroying the fragile, irreplaceable evidence. Every minute felt like an hour, every hour a day. Finally, a call came through to Riley's office late one evening. Detective, the voice on the other end, that of lead forensic technician Dr. Anya Sharma, was tight with a mixture of awe, grim determination, and a hint of something unreadable. "We got something. You need to come down here, now." Riley drove to the lab, the short distance feeling like an eternity, his stomach churning with a potent cocktail of dread and apprehension. He walked into the stark, sterile environment where a single, high-resolution monitor displayed a series of grainy, discolored, but undeniably clear digital images. The first few frames were typical Sarah. Smiling selfies with Maria, a candid shot of the cheerleading squad mid-pyramid, the stadium lights blurring into halos of light. Then, the images abruptly shifted, the innocence giving way to something far more unsettling. The last few photographs were taken inside Sarah's own car. She was in the passenger seat, looking tired, perhaps a little weary from the game and the party plans, but not overtly distressed, a faint smile still playing on her lips in one frame. And then in the driver's seat, his face clearly visible, smiling back at her, was not Mark, not Maria, not any of her known friends or acquaintances. It was David Miller. David Miller, her English teacher at North Canyon High. A respected, seemingly gentle man in his early 40s, known for his passion for literature and his quiet demeanor, a seemingly unimpeachable pillar of the community, married with 2 young children. He had been interviewed briefly in 1997, his name surfacing only as a professional contact, a teacher. He had been dismissed as having no connection beyond a purely academic one. He had even participated, publicly and seemingly empathetically, in some of the early search efforts, offering his profound condolences to the Jenkins family, his face a mask of concern. The penultimate photograph was slightly blurred, as if taken quickly or perhaps in motion, the flash struggling in the encroaching darkness. It showed Sarah's face, not smiling anymore, but with a flicker of confusion, maybe even a nascent fear in her eyes. And in the corner of the frame, partially obscured by the dirty windshield, the unmistakable, jagged peaks and distinctive desert foliage logo of the Phoenix Mountain Preserve, a desolate, rocky area known for its winding hiking trails and hidden crevices, a place where countless volunteers had searched for her, unaware that her secret was already buried just beyond the trails they so diligently trod. The images were a gut punch, a chilling revelation, a profound, unspeakable betrayal. The implications were chilling, sickening. Sarah, trusting as she was, had clearly gotten into her teacher's car, perhaps for a late-night study session or a ride home from the game that she hadn't told anyone about, for reasons that might forever remain obscure. The precise motive for what transpired in that car in that remote desert wash remained shrouded in darkness, perhaps known only to Miller and Sarah herself. But the undeniable face of her abductor, the man who had concealed her disappearance and his heinous crime for 8 long, agonizing years, was now irrevocably etched into history by her own hand, by her own camera, a silent, damning witness from the grave. The arrest of David Miller sent shockwaves of disbelief and horror through Phoenix, shattering the illusion of safety in its suburban enclaves. His family was utterly devastated, his colleagues in a state of utter disbelief, struggling to reconcile the gentle teacher they knew with the monster depicted in the evidence. He maintained his innocence, claiming he had simply given Sarah a ride home that night, and that she had insisted on being dropped off at a specific, remote spot, though he couldn't offer any plausible explanation for how her car ended up there, nor her remains, nor the camera. But the damning photographs, combined with the precise, isolated location of her remains, told a different, far more sinister story, one of trust exploited and innocence extinguished. The truth, however partial and agonizing, had finally surfaced, dragged from the depths of the unforgiving desert by an act of nature, offering a bitter, long-overdue reckoning for the Jenkins family. The full, horrific story of what transpired in those final, terrifying moments between a trusting student and her predatory teacher would perhaps never be fully known, locked away in the silence of the grave and the mind of a murderer, but the suffocating silence of the desert had, at long last, been broken.